Prince Tserriednich might just be the most talented nin user to ever exist. So if this man gets a chance to reach his true potential, who's stopping him? Let's talk about it. Now, this question comes to us today from Nitro, so thank you so much for the support, brother, and the kind words. I really appreciate it. And y'all can pause to read this entire thing, but in his question here and in some follow-up I had with Nitro, he basically wanted to know that assuming Tserriednich gets his Zetsu under 1 second, who's going to be able to beat him? So let's dissect that. And before we dive in today, I'm not going to spend any time explaining Tserriednich's ability or talking about just how talented he is, because I already have individual videos about both of those things, so check them out if you need that refresher. Okay, now as we dive in here, let me give my general power scaling disclaimer that I always give, and that is that I'm not a guy that's obsessed with feats and measuring light speed and, attack power and all that jazz. And I especially think Hunterxhunter isn't really a series that focuses on those things either. But in this case specifically, I just wanted to point out that I am going to be largely basing things on narrative here and not feats. And that's largely because we're talking about a character that does not exist yet, a full potential Tserriednich, right? But not only that, a lot of the heaviest hitters on the Black Whale and in the story right now are characters we don't really have any feats for. We just know they're strong. So basically everything here is going to be based on kind of vibes and general ideas of things that we have. So just know that going in and don't get too angry at me in the comments. All right, with all that out of the way, this man is one of the most talented nin users ever, right? So his full potential, his theoretical ceiling is off the charts. But realistically, he's never going to get there, right? Because he's probably going to be limited to this arc, and he's just never going to get the chance to reach his true potential like a main character might, right? But even still, Nitro did clarify we are going to assume that he gets stronger and is able to get that Zetsu under 1 second. So he's going to be a problem, but his biggest weakness is still going to be just how much of a novice he is when it comes to nin. So even though he is insanely talented and has an insanely broken ability and may be an absolute genius when it comes to strategy, there's some gaps in experience you just will not be able to cover in those areas. And I think that's how we can determine who could beat this man. So ultimately, I think lack of experience will be this man's downfall, but don't get me wrong. A sub 1 second Zetsu Tserriednich is beating 99.9% of people on the Black Whale, even some of the heavy hitters in my opinion, because I'm going to assume going into this fight, no one knows anything about the other person. So all of his opponents aren't going to know that he has parallel future, and it just may be end game before they even get a chance to figure out what hit them, right? But also, Tserriednich's not going to know anything about his opponents, which is why the more experienced, powerful people will be able to get one over on him. So all that being said, let's talk about who I think can actually beat him. And again, this is largely going to come down to narrative. First and foremost, Gene Freaks and Pariston Hill. Now, they may not actually be on the Black Whale, and they're probably not. We haven't seen them. They're probably on another ship just making their way to the fake Dark Continent as well, and then they'll all meet up or whatever. But just in case they are on the ship, I do think both of them would be able to take him out. The next up, I think his potential father, Beyond Netero, is also going to be able to make light work of him, because he's kind of the villain behind the scenes right now, the one that's being set up for the next arc. And also, he's Netero's child and has been training, presumably, literally, his entire life, right? He's also been to the Dark Continent before. He's just on a completely different level. Next up, I'm going with two of the Zodiacs, Batobai and Mizaistom. And all of the Zodiacs are on the ship right now, and we know that they are amongst the strongest nin users in the verse. So why just these two? Well, again, narrative here, because we don't have really any feats to scale the Zodiacs on. But in terms of narrative, we know that Tserriednich is being built up as a primary antagonist here. So it's not just going to be any run-of-the-mill character that could take down a higher potential version of him. These two, however, are two of the stronger combat-focused Zodiacs, at least as far as the narrative has implied thus far, right? We know that he is a triple star and compared to Netero in terms of his strength, and I think is considered to be like one of the strongest people alive at this point. And then Mizaistam in particular, I just think his ability could be very well suited against Tserriednich because the way his cards operate, and again, we don't have like a full description of how this ability works, but it seems as if he could just lock him down and it wouldn't matter if Tserriednich had seen the future or not. Like, he might just already be screwed. So I think their experience and skill would let them be able to beat him. Next up, Chrollo Lucilfer, head of the spider, king of the aura, right? One of the most insane ninjeniuses in the entire series. Not only does he have one of the most powerful abilities, but he also has one of the best strategic minds that we've seen. And in a battle of wits where he needs to figure out how Tserriednich's ability works and Tserriednich needs to figure out what the hell he's going to do with this book, I'm just giving the edge to our more experienced person here. Plus, in terms of narrative, Chrollo is obviously positioned to be more of a prime antagonist in this series than Tserriednich is, so I'm giving it to him. Next up, I gotta go with the Mendez Brothers here. Excuse me, two former Phantom Troop members, Hisoka and Illumi. I think these two are just on another level compared to most other characters in the series. We know that Hisoka is basically right there with Chrollo, and Hisoka ranks Illumi as the highest person we have ever seen him rank, higher than all of the Zodiacs even. And he's just an insane manipulator, right? He gets one needle in Tserriednich's neck, it's over. And Hisoka is just an absolute nin freak, right? So I do think that he would just be able to beat Tserriednich as well. Again, this is mostly based on narrative because these two are just more prominent villains, in my opinion, and are going to have a larger role in the story. Next, I want to give an honorable mention to Feitan because in terms of narrative, I think Tserriednich trumps him, but just we know his skill and specifically how his ability works, where he can kind of, in a way, reflect the damage he takes. And not only that, that damage happens in an enormous radius that you need to run away from. Like, Tserriednich is going to have no understanding of that, right? So he might just dig his own grave. So I think, like, purely based on skill, even against this higher potential Tserriednich, Feitan probably has a chance to win. But if we're purely going on narrative, then I would give it to Tserriednich. Next, I might have a bit of a strange one here because of all of Tserriednich's family members, I think Nuubi is the one that has the best chance. And don't get me wrong, there are some insane abilities in this Kakine royal family, right? We got Benjamin, we got Hulkenberg, we got Camilla. So I'm not saying those would all be fodder for Tserriednich, but if we are considering this higher potential, less than 1 second Zetsu, I think he stomps all of his brothers and sisters. But Nuubi to me is like a sleeper for this arc, and I don't think I've made a video on it yet, but I want to. I've even got, one theory out there that like he may be the ultimate winner at the end of this, which means he might be far, far stronger than anyone even realizes at this point. And I mean, obviously he won his generation succession war, so I think he could be kind of a sleeper antagonist in the background here. Now, maybe, maybe not, but just based on that maybe, I think he could beat him. And then finally, of course, Kurapika, who is most likely going to be the one that actually has to fight Tserriednich. Although, I'm still kind of holding out hope for maybe a crazy triangle between Kurapika, Chrollo, and Tserriednich. If there is more of that shared history there than we might even realize. And I've put out videos on that, so we're not going to get into it here. But, this man is just an absolute genius, right? So for the same reasons that I think Chrollo would beat Tserriednich, obviously Kurapika is even more so, right? Because he's even more of a main character. So yeah, those are really the only people on the Black Whale that I think stand a chance against a mostly realized Tserriednich. And I know I left a lot of people out there, basically all of the Zodiacs, all of the rest of the Phantom Troop, people like Bisky, and I'm sure there's some other just outliers out there that I may or may not have forgotten. But as strong as those people are, I think Tserriednich is being built up as just one of the most terrifying antagonists in the series, right? So it's going to take one of those heaviest hitters to take him down. And again, if we want to assume like an absolute ceiling Tserriednich, then, we might need to call in Meruem to beat this guy. Like, that's how crazy Togashi has built him up to be. So, thankfully, hopefully, he won't ever reach that level. But yeah, even a sub 1 second Zetsu is still an absolute monster. So I think we need a monster to take him down. And finally, as for who this realized potential Tserriednich could be, I think it's everyone else. But that's not to say he could wipe everybody else where he is right now in the manga. I think any nin user worth their salt could probably get the upper hand on him right now while his Zetsu is still over 1 second because they just know more about nin. They're going to be able to confuse him or trick him with things like in and making their nin invisible. And even if he can see the future, he won't see it coming. So like things like that. But every day he gets to train, he's wiping out more and more of those people till only the ones I've mentioned in this video are left. But let me know y'all's thoughts, and thanks for watching.